10 times WCW desperately tried to recapture the magic, but failed. Number 10. Signing Bret Hart in 1997. Whilst WWE was slowly but surely gaining popularity, WCW was still a thriving product in late 1997, and the signing of Bret Hart should have been the move that propelled WCW to the next level and carried them into the final years of the 90s. One of the elements that made WCW so exciting in the mid-90s was how they would sign top names from WWE. Names such as Hulk Hogan, Macho Man, and The Outsiders all coming over generated a ton of buzz, and WCW managed to, well, mostly successfully capitalize on the initial buzz. Unfortunately, when they signed Hart, they had zero idea what to do with him. Hart would just linger around and he would struggle with any meaningful storylines. WCW would attempt to book him as a heel and as a babyface, and both of these felt awkward upon execution, and it was clear that Hart's heart, pun intended, wasn't invested in the creative direction. Hart's run also resulted in the end of his career, as a botch kick from Goldberg in late 99 led him to retiring from in-ring competition, and this left a dark mark over what was already a heavily criticized run. Number 9. A huge heel turn. The WCW were losing fans at a rapid pace in 2000, and one of the ideas they had to get fans back into their product was a shocking and unexpected heel turn. WWE had done this countless times, and as long as the turn made sense, the fans were usually invested in the story. Goldberg would turn heel at the Great American Bash pay-per-view in 2000, turning on Kevin Nash and siding with Vince Russo. Fans had zero desire to see Goldberg in this role, and due to it making zero sense, it instantly flopped. WCW looked desperate, and whilst this emotion can sometimes result in a creative masterpiece, that simply wasn't the case here. Eric Bischoff would reflect on the dreadful heel turn on his podcast, and this is what he had to say.
We were desperate, and I was very much involved in convincing Bill Goldberg to do this. I wasn't by myself, but I did support it. And I remember talking to Bill about it, because Bill at that time, he wasn't against doing it. He just was not comfortable doing it because he didn't feel it. You know, Bill Goldberg only knew at this point a 2.5-year career, right? When he started, but he had been in the business for a whole less than 36 months. So he didn't have a sense of when something was right in terms of timing or wrong.
Bischoff will go on to state that it was obvious that Goldberg was uncomfortable in the role.
And because he was insecure about it, it took a little nurturing to get him on board. And I remember talking to Bill that night. I had a motorhome there that I was using as an office, and brought Bill into the motorhome and sat down and talked to him. And he was obviously not putting up a fight, wasn't resisting doing it, but he clearly was not comfortable doing it.
And this would be the only time in wrestling history that Goldberg worked as a heel, and he's simply a name that never worked well in that specific role. Number 8. Making Booker T the guy. Whilst the 2000 WCW product was abysmal, there were some elements of greatness, and one of the smart ideas they had was pushing Booker T. Booker had been with the company for years, and he was organically over and someone that fans legitimately wanted to see moved up the card. Booker would win the world title on several occasions during this final years of the company's existence, yet the presentation of these wins and reigns were often so bad that they overshadowed everything Booker did. The most bizarre of Booker's world title wins was when he won his first world title at the Bash at the Beach show in 2000. This was the infamous show which saw Vince Russo cut a shoot promo on Hulk Hogan, and this was the show in which Jeff Jarrett proceeded to lie down for Hogan. Booker's subsequent title win would come later in the show, yet all fans could focus on was the drama from Russo and Hogan. Number 7. David Arquette. Celebrities getting involved in pro wrestling isn't anything new, yet they have to be booked and presented correctly, or else they can make the wrestling business look like a laughingstock. In 2000, WCW completely killed any ounce of credibility their once prestigious world title had, as WCW decided to book David Arquette to win the world title. Arquette won the world title in a tag match which pitted him and world champion DDP against Jeff Jarrett and Eric Bischoff. The stipulation stated that whoever obtained the pinfall would become champion, and of course, in typical WCW fashion, Arquette won the match. The creative call was universally panned by fans, and for very good reason, as this was a sign that WCW had completely lost the plot and no longer knew what they were even doing. But Russo still likes to justify his decision to crown Arquette as a champion, often citing the mainstream attention it received, yet it never really led to any long-term gains for WCW. Number 6. Focus on the in-ring product. Now, not every call WCW made during their final few years was bad, and one of the celebrated moves was a focus on the in-ring product. This was particularly the case when it came to the Cruiserweight division, as WCW would introduce tag titles for the division, and elite names such as AJ Styles and Jamie Noble would surface in the company. It's clear from rewatching footage of these matches in late 2000 and 2001 that the crowd loved the style of the Cruiserweight action that WCW were delivering. Names such as AJ had little character, yet they were getting over thanks to their phenomenal in-ring skills, and it's definitely something that could have helped WCW if they stayed in business after 2001. You only have to look at TNA and how they had major success just a year or two later with their X division. This was a division that focused on athletic ability and work rate, and it was without a question a style of wrestling that the modern day wrestling audience were crying out for at the time. However, in WCW's case, it was too little, too late. Number 5. Trying to sign The Rock. The Rock would become one of the biggest WWE names ever in the 90s, and it's hard to imagine the Attitude Era landscape without the Great One at the helm. The interesting thing about The Rock is that WCW actually wanted to sign him during the Monday Night Wars, and even offered him double the total of his WWE deal. This could have been a game changer for WCW, as having a name like The Rock on their roster would have instantly drawn eyeballs to the product. Of course, The Rock turned them down, and this was definitely the right move, as it's possible that WCW would have struggled with how to present him and market him, just like they did with Bret Hart. Number 4. NWO 2000. During the final few years of WCW, it became clear that they were often hitting the panic button in the creative department. The most successful WCW storyline ever was the New World Order, and when they were struggling, they seemed to go back to this storyline time and time again. It's well established that the Finger Poke of Doom was one of the weirdest things they have ever done, yet the NWO reunion in late '99 was just as unusual and had little benefit. Kevin Nash, Scott Hall, Jeff Jarrett, and Bret Hart once again reformed the NWO, and this time they would use the colors of black and silver. The presentation of the group just fell flat, and it wasn't the same. The group was suffering from a distinct lack of chemistry. WCW would also add new names to the group such as Scott Steiner and the Harris Brothers, and while Steiner did well in the final few years of WCW, the Harris Brothers had no place in being in a prominent role on TV. Number 3. The Red and Yellow runs wild again. 1999 was an awful creative year for Hulk Hogan, as he was just continuously going through the motions and he was slowly losing popularity and drawing power. WCW's grand idea was for Hogan to bring back the yellow and red, and to their credit, when Hogan did this, it received a great pop. But that was literally it. The magic was soon lost again, and Hogan was just back to delivering the babyface act that he delivered for many years. According to Bischoff on his podcast, Hogan was exhausted at this point in '99, and due to him contemplating retirement, he wanted to close it out by using the red and yellow one last time. As everyone knows, Hogan didn't retire in '99, and he would proceed to wrestle in the 2000s. Number 2. The 1999 rebrand. Changing logos and staging is a great way to keep wrestling a fresh brand, and WWE have done this extremely well throughout their established history. Unfortunately, when they tried to do it in April of '99, fans instantly hated it, and they wanted the company to change it back with immediate effect. The new logo was one of the more unusual wrestling logos to ever exist, and it's hard to tell that it even says WCW. The logo was so poorly received that they even had to spell the logo out on promo material, as nobody had any idea that it was even WCW. This was a clear sign that the rebranding didn't work, yet WCW continued on and proceeded to ignore the negative fan response. And number 1, attempting to sign The Undertaker. In 2000, WCW almost acquired a name that could have turned their fortunes around. According to Kevin Nash, WCW came very close to signing the legendary Undertaker. The idea was that Taker would have used his real name and would have used his celebrated biker persona. This would have acted as a huge surge of momentum for the company, yet it's hard to definitely say if this would have been the right call for The Undertaker to make. Taker reflected on the decision to turn the WCW offer down on his podcast, and this is what the Hall of Famer had to say. If my situation had been different, if WCW hadn't told me it was going to draw any money, I don't know what I would have done. I don't. The fact that they told me you're never going to make money, that was always a chip that I carried on my shoulder. Even when they called, I remember Nash calling me and saying, I think I could get you this if you want to come down. The Undertaker would ultimately say that his loyalty to Vince McMahon was a determining factor, and this was without a doubt the smartest decision the WWE icon could have ever made.